The end of last week, I wrapped up what I've come to think of as my 11-week adventure. And what I want to share today is the 4 lessons that came out of this 11-week adventure for me. The lessons are this: embrace being a beginner, borrow belief from other people, say yes, even when it may frighten you a bit. And the final one is to really give thought to our definition of failure and how we determine failures from winning and learning. So, these are the 4 lessons that I learned over the course of this 11-week period. So, now let me back up and give you a little bit of context of how these lessons came to be. The beginning of my 11-week adventure started on August 6th. I had a meeting scheduled with Mike Kim. I'm in his mastermind group, and over the last few years, I've come to see him as a coach, a mentor, and a friend. Now, to be perfectly honest, I requested the meeting. I can't find in my notes, nor do I really remember exactly what the purpose of me requesting this call was. I do remember the conversation. And I remember the end of the conversation very clearly. At the end, Mike challenged me to do 3 free master classes before the end of 2024. 3 free master classes. Now, I'm familiar with creating content. I enjoy creating content and coursework, and yet I had been procrastinating on this piece of it. So there's components of this. There is the promoting it. There's creating the slide deck and the actual master class. Then it's the marketing and sales of offering to the people who have signed up for it into the program. So there's multiple components, and I was procrastinating 100%. And I had all kinds of reasons. I felt I wasn't ready. Honestly, it comes down to fear. It was fear and doubt. Am I good enough? Can I really do it? Am I going to look like a dummy when I do it? And in the end of that conversation, after Mike and I had talked, and he threw out this invitation to a challenge, and I said yes, a resounding yes. As I got off that call and really contemplated what I had agreed to, I had a realization is that I was borrowing belief from Mike. I did not have belief in myself. I trust him. And I trust that he can see things and was seeing something that I wasn't in me. And I said yes. And I did not regret it. I'll tell you more about that story as we go along in this little 4 lessons of the last 11 weeks. So the first one is to borrow belief. Now, we know the people that have our best interests at heart, the people that understand what we're doing, that have some knowledge about what we're doing or considering, and truly have our best interest at heart. We know those people, right? So there are times that we cannot see in ourselves. It could be a blind spot. It could be we're just like me. It was too much fear and doubt. Borrow belief from those people. When they look at us and they say, you can do this, do this. Yes. Borrow belief. It is a great gift to have those people in our lives that when we are really sitting in doubt and uncertainty, that we know that we can count on them to look into us, to see things we're not seeing, and to give us the green light when we can't get past the red light in our own mind. So lesson 1, borrow belief, and know who you can borrow belief from. I started work in the first masterclass. And what I fairly quickly realized is that what I had to embrace and had been resisting was being a beginner, a newbie beginner. Now, you're probably like me. You've obtained a certain level of mastery in an area, a skill set, and most likely in multiple skill sets. So the idea of going back to a beginner, like a newbie beginner, is uncomfortable, or at least it is uncomfortable for me. I should say was uncomfortable for me. I'm accustomed to having mastery, to knowing my stuff, to coming across as someone who knows my stuff. Going back to a newbie beginner, I was exposing all that I didn't know. That was where my hangup was. So the second lesson is embrace being a beginner. The only way to gain more skills, the only way to get better at something is to do it. Someone said to me years ago, I don't remember who, that you have to have a result to improve a result. So I had to do some master classes and do some of the work around this part of my business in order to improve it. There was no other way. And sometimes there's no other way than being a beginner. When I embraced being a beginner, finally could recognize it, then I was like, oh, this is what it is. All right. Then I had my head around it. Then I was no longer frustrated by the fact that it took me, oh, I don't know, 4 to 5 hours to write the series of promotional emails. It frequently is going to take a lot longer than when we have mastery. So, lesson number 2, embrace being a beginner. Lesson number 3 is say yes, even when it's a bit uncomfortable. Yes, you have heard me say many times that frequently we need to say no more often. Whatever we say yes to means that it's going to mean a no to something else, and that is true. And still, we need to really pay attention and evaluate when we should say yes, even when it's uncomfortable. So, saying yes to Mike to do the free masterclasses was uncomfortable, and it was the correct answer. And yet, this lesson appeared again and again in this 11-week period. I had plans for a vacation, a 10-day vacation, and I knew I was going to be out of town for about 6 days for a family wedding in the Upper Peninsula. Now, these were both fairly close together. I had planned them. The vacation, obviously, the wedding was, I was going to show up when it was, but the vacation had been planned with the friend I was going with to leave me a couple of weeks between these events. It felt like that was a busy enough schedule. And then I had agreed to do these master classes. Okay, so I'm feeling like my calendar is full. And then the dates were announced for our fall mastermind meetup. Twice a year, we meet in person. And it was right after this family wedding. And yet, the dates worked perfectly. I would get home from the wedding and need to leave the next day for the mastermind meetup. So it worked. Felt like a lot. I said, yes. All right, I can do that. I can fit that thing in. And then a client that I've been doing some work with was doing an event, an overnight event in another part of the state, and invited me. I really wanted to go. I really enjoyed the work with the team, the great people, sounded like fun. But it's right before I leave for the wedding. And yet again, it all worked out. I could go to the event, I could come back, have one day, and then leave for the wedding. Can I swing it? I said yes. So, what happened with all of this? Well, it all turned out fine. Were there a couple of things that were a little chaotic? Absolutely. Do I have any regret of saying yes to all of those events and to doing the master classes? Not at all. They were all perfect. And yet, my inclination was to say no. My lesson for this is when we are presented with an opportunity, sometimes we know resoundingly it's a heck no or it's a heck yes. And other times it's not that clear. So pause for a bit to really evaluate. And don't be afraid when you really think it's worthwhile to say yes, even if it makes you a bit uncomfortable. The final lesson is about really being clear and being willing to redefine failure. What is failure? What is progress? How do we identify it? And this now goes back to the master classes. Mike challenged me for 3. I did 2. 2 were complete before I started all of this traveling. They were a lot of work. I learned a lot. But he challenged me to 3. Here's the reality. I'm running out of time in this calendar year. Am I going to get the 3rd masterclass done? I'm not sure. I have a meeting with him tomorrow, so we'll see at the end of that. But I'm not sure. So as I was reflecting over this weekend, I'm like, so is that a failure? And what I realized is it's not a failure, and it can be really easy to quickly call things a failure. So, why is it that if I accepted a challenge for 3 and I've only completed 2, why do I not see that as a failure? Because the number wasn't as important as doing it. Mike threw out a challenge to me because I couldn't get started on my own. So, what was really the win was doing it. Again, I can't improve it until I do it. So, the first one was doing the first one. The second one was doing the second one. Then the win becomes I have a sense of the workflow. I have a sense of how my mind thinks about it. I now understand where I need to learn more. I need some more skills in creating a slide deck. My slide decks are too stationary. Is that going to take me a huge amount of time to do? No. And yet, it is a skill. It's something that I'm going to need to dedicate the time to learn. None of it was a failure. Even if I don't do the third one, it was a win. That reminded me on how important it is for us to truly understand what we're trying to accomplish when we set a goal. A goal is simply to give us a new orientation to where we are today and where we want to go into the future. When we set a goal, or accept in this case a challenge that became a goal, I didn't really know what it was going to entail at that time. I really had no idea because remember, I'd been avoiding it. So the win is that I leaned into it and I did it. The win wasn't so much the magic number of 3 as it was to start doing it, to get better at it. So give some thought. How do you declare things as wins or losses? And are you being overly harsh? Or perhaps you're really letting yourself skate by. So I think it really warrants a little bit of thought of how are we defining a win? How are we defining a failure? And then being cautious when we label things as to what it is and really why are we giving it that label. So it's been an absolute blast of an 11 weeks. And quite honestly, I'm glad to now just be home for a bit of time. 4 lessons that I learned, just in recap: borrow belief from others when we don't have enough ourselves. Embrace being a beginner. Say yes, even if it's making us a little uncomfortable. And look closely at how we define wins and how, even more importantly, we define failures. So those are my 4 lessons from the last 11 weeks. And now I'm having a great amount of fun really integrating these lessons into what I'm doing moving forward. After all, reflection really it makes most sense and has the most value when we take action on what we have learned. Have a great week. Bye for now.